My parents bought my brother a brand new sports car and told me, "You'll never have that." So, I left and focused on myself. 5 years later, he saw my private jet and called Mom, sobbing. How did he get that? Before I dive deeper, I'm curious, where are you all watching from today? Drop a comment below, and if you've ever felt like the underdog, overlooked by the people who should champion you most, hit that like and subscribe button. Your support means the world to me. My name is Dion, and I'm 31 now, but my story really begins in a classic white colonial house with blue shutters in a middle-class Boston neighborhood. On the outside, we looked like the picture-perfect American family. My dad, Richard, was a bank manager, always impeccably dressed. My mom, Margaret, an English teacher, known for her sharp mind and even sharper grading. But inside those walls, the dynamic was anything but perfect. My older brother, Travis, was 4 years my senior. He was athletic, outgoing, charismatic, truly the son my parents' world revolved around. His room was a shrine of trophies and medals, a testament to his triumphs. Mine, it felt like an afterthought, filled with hand-me-down furniture and bare walls. I often wondered if I was simply an unexpected addition, a second thought after they'd planned for just one child. This pattern, this constant comparison and blatant favoritism, started early. When Travis learned to ride a bike, my dad spent weeks running alongside him, cheering every wobble and triumphant pedal stroke. My turn? I got a quick push, a hasty instruction, and then Dad was off, rushing to Travis's baseball practice. My mom wasn't much different. She'd spend hours patiently explaining homework to Travis, but when I came to her with questions, I'd get a dismissive, "Figure it out yourself. Dion, you're smart enough." It wasn't wrong, I was smart, but the implication was clear. Travis needed help, I didn't, and therefore, I didn't deserve her time or attention. My 10th birthday remains seared into my memory as a brutally clear example of where I stood. I'd hinted about a small party, dreamt of a special breakfast. Instead, I found a hastily scribbled note on the kitchen counter. "Travis has a regional baseball tournament today. Cereal in the pantry. We'll celebrate your birthday tomorrow. Love, Mom and Dad." I sat at that empty kitchen table, pouring myself stale cereal, fighting back tears. No present, no card, just silence in an empty house on what should have been my special day. Later that afternoon, a kind, elderly neighbor, Harold, showed up. He was a retired business professor, a widower who lived alone. He handed me a small, neatly wrapped gift. "Happy birthday, young man," he said with a warm, crinkly smile. "Noticed your folks headed out early. Thought you might like some company." Harold sat with me in the backyard, watching as I opened his gift, a book called Young Entrepreneurs Who Changed the World. It was the first time anyone had given me something that wasn't a generic toy. It felt like Harold saw something in me that my own parents couldn't. "You've got that look in your eye," he told me. "The same look my son Jackson had at your age. A mind that's always working, figuring things out." That afternoon, Harold shared stories of people who built empires from nothing but determination. For the first time, I felt truly seen, not as Travis's little brother or the afterthought child, but as Dion, a boy with genuine potential. When my parents finally returned that evening, Travis was buzzing with victory. No one mentioned my birthday until I brought it up. "Oh, right," Dad said, genuinely surprised. "Tell you what, champ, we'll pick up a cake tomorrow." They never did. My birthday faded into the background, another casualty of Travis's baseball season. School became my refuge. While Travis scraped by with C grades despite Mom's constant help, I excelled effortlessly. By 5th grade, I was reading at a high school level, solving math problems years ahead. When I brought home straighter report cards, Mom would give a quick glance and a "That's nice, Dion," before returning to her tasks. Dad would ruffle my hair, mutter, "Smart kid," then immediately pivot to Travis's latest game. I even tried sports, joining the basketball team in 6th grade, hoping to connect with Dad. I practiced relentlessly. At my first game, I scored 12 points, a surge of hope in my chest as I scanned the stands. Empty. Later, I learned Dad had driven Travis to a baseball showcase 3 hours away. By 13, I stopped expecting them to show up. Instead, I poured my energy into academics and my growing fascination with business, inspired by Harold's gift. I devoured business magazines, followed stock markets, and dreamed of starting my own company. When I shared these ambitions one night at dinner, Travis scoffed so hard he nearly choked on his meatloaf. You? He sputtered, running a business? My parents exchanged glances, and Mom patted my hand. Maybe something more realistic, honey. Not everyone is cut out for that world. Their lack of faith stung. But deep down, it also planted a fierce seed of determination. By 16, I was done waiting for their approval. With Travis away at college, partying more than studying on our parents' dime, I got a job at Elaine's bakery. Elaine was a tough but fair boss, a woman in her 50s who'd built her business from scratch. 6 a.m. sharp, Dion, she'd said. Bread doesn't wait for excuses. For 2 years, I woke at 5 a.m., biked through all weather, and learned the value of hard work. My hands grew calloused, my arms stronger. More importantly, I was earning my own money, saving every dollar in an account only I knew about. Meanwhile, news of Travis's college exploits was constant. While fraternity parties, 2 major switches, mediocre grades, disciplinary warnings. Yet, my parents continued paying his tuition, housing, and sending emergency money. He's finding himself, Mom would say defensively when I questioned Travis's need for another $500 for textbooks. When I wasn't at the bakery, I started a side business fixing computers. It began with Mrs. Jenkins's laptop after her grandson spilled juice on it. Word spread quickly among our older neighbors. Harold, my steadfast supporter, was my first customer and biggest promoter. The boy's a natural problem solver, he'd tell everyone. Fixed my computer in 20 minutes when those big chain stores wanted $300. As my business grew, I needed to invest. One evening, I approached my parents with a meticulously prepared business plan, projections, and a request for a $500 loan. I'll pay it back with interest within 6 months, I promised, showing them my records. Dad barely glanced at my spreadsheets. Dion, this is a cute hobby, but shouldn't you focus on school? But Dad, I have a 4.0 GPA. This teaches me real-world skills. Mom sighed. Honey, we just don't have extra money. Travis's fraternity is having some issues, and we need to help him with housing next semester. Issues. I knew what that meant. More trouble, more bailing out. Just focus on getting into a good college, Dad concluded. Don't waste time dreaming about being some tech entrepreneur. That's not realistic for someone like you. Someone like me. Those words stung, echoing in my head for days. It was around this time that Harold introduced me to his son, Jackson, visiting from New York. Jackson had built a successful marketing agency from scratch, employing over 30 people. Meeting him was like seeing a possible future me. Dad tells me you've got the entrepreneurial bug, Jackson said, casually dressed but clearly successful. I'm trying, I admitted, suddenly feeling childish about my little computer repair service. Everyone starts somewhere, Jackson reassured me. My first business was walking dogs in college. Made $20 a day and thought I was rich. For hours, he shared his failures and successes, offering practical advice no textbook could. Before he left, he gave me his card. Call me anytime. And remember, the people who tell you what you can't do are usually the ones who couldn't do it themselves. My relationship with Travis grew colder with each visit home. He resented my developing independence. Still playing computer repairman? He'd mock. Real impressive, bro. I'm sure the ladies love a guy who smells like thermal paste. One Thanksgiving, Travis brought home his girlfriend, Jessica, all perfect hair and constant pout. At dinner, as I recounted a challenging computer recovery to Harold, Travis cut me off. God, Dion, nobody cares about your nerd hobby. Jessica and I are going to Europe this summer. Dad, we need to discuss the budget for that. I looked at my parents, expecting a reprimand, but Mom was already asking Jessica about their travel plans, Dad nodding approvingly. The final, shattering blow came at my high school graduation. I was valedictorian with a full scholarship to State University, but my moment was overshadowed. My speech was at 10 a.m. Travis had a semi-important soccer game at 11, 45 minutes away. We're so proud of you, Mom said the night before, not quite meeting my eyes. But we might have to slip out right after your speech to make it to Travis's game. You understand, right? This scout could be really important for his future. I stood at that podium the next morning, delivering my speech about perseverance, watching my parents check their watches. They didn't even stay for the diploma. They rushed out as soon as I returned to my seat. But Harold was there, along with Elaine from the bakery and several of my computer repair clients. They cheered loudly. Harold hugged me. Their loss, he said simply. Some people can't recognize gold, even when it's right in front of them. That summer after graduation was a turning point. My partial scholarship meant I'd still need about $8,000 for tuition, plus living expenses. I planned to work multiple jobs. Meanwhile, Travis finally graduated college after 5.5 years, with mediocre grades and a communications degree he'd settled on. But thanks to Dad's college roommate, he landed a job at Wilson Marketing. So my parents threw him a lavish graduation party, transforming our backyard with catering, a hired bartender, and string lights. I helped set up, trying to swallow the bitter fact that my own valedictorian graduation had merited nothing more than a hastily purchased supermarket cake. The day of the party, I played my part, mingling, refilling drinks, smiling at relatives who still asked if I was in high school. Travis held court, exaggerating his college achievements, conveniently omitting the academic probation and the time Dad had to bail him out of jail. As the evening wound down, Dad clinked his glass, his face flushed with pride, arm around Travis. Today we celebrate not just Travis's graduation, but his entry into the professional world. Your mother and I couldn't be prouder. Mom stood beside them, dabbing her eyes. I watched from the sidelines, a familiar ache tightening in my chest. And because this milestone deserves something special, Dad continued, pulling an envelope from his pocket. We have a surprise for you. Travis opened it with an exaggerated flourish, pulling out a Porsche car key. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Dad gestured toward the front of the house, and everyone surged forward. I followed, a cold dread growing with each step. There it was, parked in our driveway, adorned with an enormous red bow, a brand new Porsche 911, gleaming silver. At least $120,000. Travis let out a whoop, running his hands over its sleek curves before jumping into the driver's seat. Mom and Dad stood nearby, beaming. I stood frozen, trying to process it. My partial scholarship meant an $8,000 yearly tuition gap, plus books and living. I'd calculated how to work multiple jobs, scrape by. And here, my parents had just gifted Travis a luxury sports car that cost more than my entire 4-year education. After the guests finally left, I found my parents in the kitchen, still high on their grand gesture. Can I talk to you guys for a minute? I asked, my voice tight. Of course, honey, Mom said, but she kept loading the dishwasher, her back mostly to me. I was wondering about my university tuition, I began. I know my scholarship covers most of it, but I'll still need about $8,000 this first year, plus living expenses. Dad leaned against the counter, his celebratory mood hardening. What about your savings from that computer thing you do? I have some, but not enough for 4 years of expenses, I explained. I thought maybe you could help, since you're helping Travis with. I gestured vaguely toward the driveway where the Porsche gleamed. Mom and Dad exchanged that look, the one that always preceded disappointment. Dion, Dad said, his tone condescending. Travis has a real career path ahead of him. The connections he'll make at Wilson Marketing could set him up for life. He needs to make the right impression. And my education doesn't matter? I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. Of course, it matters, Mom interjected. But you've always been self-sufficient. You have your scholarship. You're good at finding ways to make money with your little projects. Little projects? My pent-up frustration finally boiled over. I've been working since I was 16, saving every dollar, while Travis partied through college on your dime. Dad's expression hardened. That's enough. Travis earned that car with his hard work and dedication. What hard work? I demanded. His C- average? The 3 times he changed his major? Or was it the frat parties and spring break trips you funded? You watch your tone, young man. Dad warned. I just want to understand, I persisted. Why does Travis get everything handed to him, while I have to fight for scraps of your attention, let alone financial support? Mom slammed a plate down. Because that's how it is, Dion. Travis needed our help to succeed. So, I'm being punished for being self-reliant? Dad stepped closer, jabbing a finger at my chest. You should be grateful for your scholarship. Do you have any idea what a car like that takes to earn? The years of hard work and sacrifice. I looked him directly in the eyes. You mean your hard work, not Travis's? Travis has potential, Dad said firmly. He just needed the right opportunities and support. And I don't have potential? The question came out smaller than I intended, revealing the insecurity beneath my anger. That's when Mom delivered the line that would shatter me and simultaneously change the entire trajectory of my life. Honey, Travis just fits better in that world. He has the personality, the connections. The car suits him. You'll never have that. And that's okay. You can have a perfectly respectable life with your computers and practical career. You'll never have that. The words hit me like a physical blow, leaving me gasping for air. Not because I couldn't earn it, but because they didn't believe I belonged in a world of success and achievement. Travis fit their image. I was merely expected to be adequate. I left the kitchen without another word, climbing the stairs as Travis revved the Porsche's engine in the driveway for the 5th time. I closed my door, sat on my bed, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to cry. When the tears finally stopped, I reached for my phone and called Jackson. They bought him a Porsche, I said, not bothering with greetings. And Mom just told me I'd never have anything like it. Jackson listened, his quiet understanding a balm. You know that's complete bullshit, right? He finally said. Their lack of vision isn't your limitation. What am I supposed to do now? I asked, feeling utterly lost. What do you want to do? The simplicity of his question was profound. For years, I'd been chasing their approval. Every achievement, every responsible decision, had been an attempt to prove myself worthy of the attention they showered on Travis. It had never worked. I want to leave, I realized aloud. I want to go somewhere where no one's comparing me to Travis or setting limits on what I can achieve. Then that's what you do, Jackson said. My apartment in New York has a spare room. It's nothing fancy, but it's yours if you want it while you figure things out. That night, after everyone was asleep, I packed 2 suitcases. I wrote a brief note, explaining I needed space to define my own path, left it on my pillow, and slipped out of the house that had never truly felt like home. As I waited at the bus station for the first morning bus to New York, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of possibility, I made a promise to myself. Someday, I would prove them wrong. Not for revenge, but for the scared kid inside me who had always believed he was somehow less deserving than his brother. New York City hit me like a ton of bricks. It was louder, faster, and terrifyingly intimidating. Jackson met me at Port Authority, his confident smile a welcome beacon. Welcome to the jungle, he said, taking a suitcase. First rule, never make eye contact with people talking to themselves on the subway. His apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in Brooklyn, a neighborhood just starting to shed its grit. The spare room was barely a closet, just enough for a twin mattress and a small desk. But it had a window overlooking a courtyard with a single determined tree growing between concrete slabs, which felt oddly symbolic. It's not much, Jackson admitted, but the rent is cheap, and it's yours as long as you need it. My plan to transfer my scholarship to a New York university quickly crumbled. Out-of-state tuition was astronomical, and my scholarship wouldn't transfer. I'd have to start from scratch. Reality set in fast. Within a week, I was a barista at a coffee shop near NYU, working the 5 a.m. opening shift. The pay was minimal, but the tips were decent, and I could study during slow periods. By the second week, I'd added an evening job waiting tables at an Italian restaurant. Between shifts, I attended community college classes, taking basic requirements that would transfer to a 4-year university once I could afford it. The days were grueling, sleep a luxury, but there was a strange, exhilarating freedom in the struggle. For the first time, I was completely responsible for my own destiny. Jackson, though rarely home, working long hours building his agency, became my mentor by proxy. He'd leave business books on my desk with post-it notes marking important passages. On Sundays, his only day off, he'd take me to breakfast, patiently answering my endless questions about strategy and entrepreneurship. The degree is important, he'd advise over pancakes. But what you're learning out here, hustling and balancing multiple responsibilities, that's the education that will truly serve you. 3 months after arriving, Jackson told me he was moving in with his girlfriend, and I'd need a new place. Panic flared, until he introduced me to Ethan and Nate, 2 computer science students at NYU who needed a 3rd roommate. Our new apartment was a cramped 2-bedroom in the East Village, with me sleeping on a futon in what was supposed to be the living room. Ethan was a coding prodigy, Nate a social butterfly who brought an endless stream of friends through our tiny space. Despite the constant noise, living with them expanded my world. Ethan deepened my programming knowledge. Nate, a networking genius, introduced me to a diverse crowd of ambitious young people. It was at one of Nate's impromptu gatherings that I met Sophia, a finance major with a sharp mind and even sharper tongue. I found her debating economic policy with a group of increasingly uncomfortable guys, dismantling their arguments with surgical precision. The invisible hand of the market isn't so invisible when you actually study who benefits, she was saying as I edged closer. Later that night, we ended up sharing the fire escape, both seeking a moment of quiet. "You're not from New York," she stated, her eyes appraising me. "Boston," I confirmed. "And let me guess, you're another aspiring entrepreneur who thinks he'll be the next tech billionaire?" I laughed. I'd settle for making enough to afford a bedroom with an actual door. Something about my honesty lowered her guard. We talked until sunrise about economics, technology, and our families. Hers were Korean immigrants who had sacrificed everything for her education and expected nothing less than perfection. Different cultural background, same crushing pressure, she observed when I shared a sanitized version of my own family dynamic. Sophia became a constant presence in my life, first as a friend, then as something more. She was brilliant, driven, and believed in me in a way few others ever had. On nights when the exhaustion of working multiple jobs and studying full-time threatened to overwhelm me, her unwavering conviction that I could succeed kept me going. By my second year in New York, I'd saved enough to transfer to a 4-year college, still working both jobs. It was in an economics class that the idea for my first real business began to crystallize. The most successful businesses identify a genuine need and fill it, our professor explained, preferably a need that current market solutions are overlooking. Looking at my classmates, many of them juggling jobs and studies like me, I saw an untapped opportunity. Students needed flexible work that accommodated their changing schedules, and local businesses needed reliable, short-term help without the commitment of hiring permanent employees. I began sketching out a platform that would connect students with local businesses for shift work, event staffing, and short-term projects. The idea consumed me. I spent every spare moment researching, learning about app development, refining the concept. Ethan, intrigued by the technical challenge, offered to help build the initial prototype. Nate, seeing the potential, started informally polling business owners he knew. Sophia brought her financial expertise, helping me craft a business plan and projections that actually made sense. For 6 months, we worked every spare moment, building a basic version of the platform. We named it Shift Link and began testing it with a small group of students and local businesses around NYU. The feedback was encouraging enough that I decided to seek investment to develop a proper app and expand. The reality of pitching to investors was far more brutal than I anticipated. Over 3 months, I was rejected 17 times. Too young, too niche, technology not proprietary enough, lack of experience. After each rejection, I'd call Jackson, who had truly become like a big brother. 17 no's just means you're 17 steps closer to a yes, he'd say. Every major success story includes a chapter of rejection. The 18th investor was Abigail Bennett, a former tech executive who ran a small venture capital fund focused on diverse founders. Unlike the others, she listened intently, asking questions that showed she truly understood our problem. "I was a scholarship student who worked 3 jobs through college," she told me after our formal meeting. "I would have killed for a service like this. I'm in for $50,000, but I want 20% equity and a seat on your board." It was a tough deal, more equity than I wanted to give up, but her expertise and connections would be invaluable. I accepted. With funding secured, we rented a small office, really just a room above a laundromat in Bushwick, and began building ShiftLink in earnest. Ethan came on full-time as our CTO. We hired 2 more developers. Nate handled business development part-time while finishing his degree. Sophia, still completing her finance program, became our unofficial CFO, reviewing our books after classes. 6 months into development, disaster struck. Ethan, burnout from coding 16 hours a day, announced he was taking a job at Google. Without him, our timeline would be derailed. That same week, our main competitor raised $10 million to expand nationwide. I spiraled into what Sophia later called my dark week. Convinced we were doomed, I stopped going to the office, ignored calls, even from Abigail. It was Harold who pulled me out of my funk. He flew to New York at Jackson's request and showed up unannounced at my apartment. I'm too old to climb these stairs regularly, so you better listen while the first time, he said, settling his 70-year-old frame onto our lumpy couch. This moment right here, this is the fork in the road. One path leads back to being the boy whose family didn't believe in him. The other path leads to becoming the man who proves them wrong. His words cut through my self-pity. That night, I called Sophia. Together, we mapped out a new strategy. We'd scale back some features, prioritize others, and I would learn enough coding to help bridge the gap until we could hire a replacement for Ethan. For the next 2 months, I slept an average of 4 hours a night, dividing my time between coding tutorials, business operations, and occasional classes. I dropped several courses, deciding that completing my degree would have to wait. The revised Shift link launched 8 months after our initial investment, servicing 3 university areas in Manhattan and Brooklyn. The first month was a disaster of glitches and low adoption. The second was marginally better. Then, in our third month, something shifted. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. Businesses started requesting to join. By month 6, we were breaking even operationally. 1 year after launch, Shift Link was serving 5 college areas across New York City, with plans to expand to Boston and Philadelphia. We had grown to a team of 12, moved to a real office in Chelsea, and raised an additional $500,000 in funding at a valuation that made my initial stake worth over $1 million on paper. I was 23 years old, a college dropout with a growing company, and for the first time in my life, I felt exactly where I was supposed to be. By the time I turned 25, Shift Link had transformed from a scrappy startup into a genuine force. We had 50 employees, operations in 5 major East Coast cities, and a valuation of $5 million after our latest funding round. My life was night and day from those early New York days. I'd moved from the futon to my own 1-bedroom in a doorman building. It wasn't luxurious by New York standards, but having my own space felt like an incredible achievement. Sophia and I had been dating for nearly 3 years, supporting each other through the grueling demands of building careers in a city that never sleeps. She had graduated with honors and taken a position at an investment bank, working hours almost as brutal as mine. We didn't see each other as much as we wanted, but the time we did have was precious, filled with conversations about our dreams. One evening, sharing takeout Chinese on my small balcony overlooking the city lights, Sophia asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Have you spoken to your family at all?" I set down my chopsticks, a familiar twist in my stomach. "No," I admitted. "Not since I left." 5 years is a long time, Dion, she said gently. "I'm not saying you need to forgive them, but closure might help you move forward." She was right, as she often was about emotional matters. Despite my success, the wound of my family's dismissal remained raw. I had buried myself in work partly to avoid confronting that pain. The next day, I finally worked up the courage to call home. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I guessed Mom would be back from school. The phone rang 4 times before she answered with a cautious, "Hello." "Mom," I said, surprised by how thick my voice sounded. "It's Dion." The silence that followed felt eternal. "Dion?" she finally said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and something I couldn't quite identify. "Is that really you? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mom. Better than fine, actually." I thought it was time to check in. What followed was a stilted conversation, both of us dancing around the circumstances of my departure. She told me Dad was still at the bank, but battling health issues. Travis, she said, had been let go from the marketing firm 2 years ago and had bounced between jobs since. "He's having a tough time," she whispered, as if Travis might overhear. "The economy's been difficult, and you know how sensitive he can be to criticism." I bit back the urge to point out that Travis had never faced real criticism in his life, at least not from them. "What about you?" she asked. "Where have you been all this time? We tried to find you, you know. Your father called some of your friends, but nobody seemed to know anything." I gave her a condensed version of my life, omitting both the hardest struggles and the extent of my success. I wasn't ready to share those details yet. "I'm in New York," I concluded. "I started a company connecting students with part-time work. It's going well." "A company?" she repeated, genuinely surprised. "You mean you own a business?" "Yes, Mom. I'm the founder and CEO." There was another pause, and I could almost hear her recalibrating her perception of me. That's wonderful, Dion. Your father will be so surprised." The way she said it made it clear that surprised was an understatement. They had never expected me to amount to much. Maybe we could see you, she suggested tentatively. We could come to New York, or you could visit home. It's been so long. I wasn't ready for that. Let me think about it, Mom. This was a big step, just making this call. Of course, she backpedaled quickly. Whatever you're comfortable with. Just don't disappear again, okay? Despite everything, we do care about you. After hanging up, I sat at my desk for a long time, emotions swirling. Part of me wanted to believe her, to think they had missed me. Another part, the wounded boy who had left home, with nothing but 2 suitcases, remained skeptical. I called Sophia. I don't know what I was expecting, I confessed. Some grand apology, maybe. Instead, it was like talking to a distant acquaintance. Relationships take time to rebuild, she reminded me. This was just a first step. Over the next few months, I exchanged occasional phone calls with my mother. They were always superficial, focusing on safe topics. My father never came to the phone, though Mom assured me he was glad I was doing well. During one call, I suggested they visit New York to see the company I'd built. There was a pause before Mom replied, "Oh, that would be lovely, but your father's so busy at the bank right now, and I've taken on extra tutoring hours. Perhaps another time." It was the same pattern, just with more polite excuses. They still couldn't make time for me or my achievements. The realization was both painful and liberating. I decided then to stop seeking their approval. My energy and emotional investment would go toward the people who had supported me: Sophia, Jackson, Harold, and the incredible team I'd built at ShiftLink. With this resolution, I threw myself even more completely into growing the company. We expanded to Chicago and Miami, doubled our tech team, and developed more sophisticated algorithms. As we approached our 5th anniversary, ShiftLink became the leading platform of its kind on the East Coast, with over 200,000 students and 15,000 businesses using our service. Our revenue had grown exponentially. We were consistently profitable. It was around this time I received an unexpected email from William Hayes, founder of JobConnect, one of the largest employment platforms in the country. He wanted to meet. Sophia helped me prepare. "Remember, you've built something valuable," she emphasized. "Don't let them intimidate you." The meeting took place at an upscale midtown restaurant. William Hayes, silver-haired, confident, cut to the chase. "Your platform has impressive penetration in the college market, a demographic we've struggled to capture. We're interested in acquiring ShiftLink." He named a figure that made me nearly choke on my water: $30 million. "I need to discuss this with my team and investors," I managed to say, maintaining a composed exterior despite my racing heart. "Of course," he nodded. "Take a week to consider. But know that this offer won't be on the table indefinitely." The decision wasn't easy. ShiftLink was my creation, my redemption story, the proof that my parents had been wrong. Selling felt like giving up a part of my identity. I consulted Abigail, who had become a trusted advisor. "Sometimes the greatest entrepreneurial skill is knowing when to exit," she counseled. "This offer values the company fairly, and JobConnect's resources could help your platform reach many more students than you could on your own." After days of deliberation, discussions with my team, and many late-night conversations with Sophia, I accepted the offer. The terms included a 2-year transition period, where I would continue to lead ShiftLink as a division of JobConnect, ensuring our mission and culture weren't lost. When the deal closed, my share after paying investors and setting aside equity for my team came to just over $12 million. At 25, I had become a millionaire many times over. To celebrate, I took Sophia on a dream vacation to Italy. On our last evening, sitting on the terrace of a villa overlooking the Amalfi Coast, I proposed. The ring was elegant but not ostentatious, much like Sophia herself. "Yes," she said simply, her eyes shining with tears. 1,000 times yes. As we sipped champagne under the Italian stars, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced before. The angry, hurt young man who had left Boston 5 years earlier had transformed into someone I was proud to be. For the first time, I was excited about the future, not because of what I had to prove, but because of what I wanted to build and who I wanted to build it with. For years passed in a blur. After completing my 2-year commitment with JobConnect, I used my experience and capital to launch a venture capital firm specializing in startups founded by people from underrepresented backgrounds. We called it Outsider Ventures, a nod to my own journey as someone who had succeeded despite being told I didn't belong. The firm quickly built a reputation for not just providing funding, but also mentorship and connections to founders who typically struggled to access traditional venture capital. We invested in 27 companies across various sectors, and our portfolio was performing exceptionally well. Sophia had left her banking position to join me as a partner, bringing her sharp financial acumen and strategic thinking to our investment decisions. We married in a small ceremony, attended by our closest friends, including Jackson and Harold, who at 77 insisted on dancing until midnight. Our life together settled into a comfortable rhythm of work and leisure. We purchased a penthouse apartment in Tribeca with views of the Hudson River and a weekend home in the Catskills. While we weren't flashy with our wealth, we enjoyed the freedom it provided to live and work on our own terms. One indulgence I allowed myself was the purchase of a private jet, a Gulfstream G650. It wasn't a light decision, but as our investments required increasingly frequent travel, it made practical sense. More importantly, perhaps, it represented a final, tangible symbol of how far I had come from the boy who had been told he would never have that. It was this aircraft that led to the most unexpected reunion of my life. I was returning from meetings in California, landing at a private airfield outside Chicago to refuel before continuing to New York. As the plane was serviced, I stretched my legs in the small terminal. As I walked toward the coffee shop, a familiar voice stopped me cold. Dion Fitzgerald, is that you? I turned to find Travis standing a few feet away, looking shocked and deeply uncomfortable. He was dressed in a department store suit that hung slightly loose, suggesting he'd lost weight. His hair was thinning, fine lines etched around his eyes, making him look older than his 35 years. Travis, I replied, genuinely surprised. What are you doing in Chicago? He gestured vaguely. Insurance conference. I'm working for Allstate now. Been there about 8 months. His eyes darted past me to where the gleaming Gulfstream sat visible through the large windows. Are you on a private flight? The disbelief in his voice was palpable. Yes, I answered simply, not elaborating. An awkward silence stretched between us, years of unspoken history creating an almost physical barrier. You look good, he finally said, his eyes taking in my tailored suit and confident posture. Mom mentioned you were doing well in New York, but she didn't say. How's she doing? I asked, deliberately changing the subject. And Dad? They're okay, he mumbled. Dad retired last year. His blood pressure got pretty bad, but he's better now. Mom still tutors a few students, mostly to stay busy. He hesitated, then added, They talk about you sometimes, wondering how you're really doing. The calls with Mom are pretty short, from what she says. I nodded, unsure how to respond. My relationship with my parents remained distant, limited to brief calls on holidays. Travis's gaze kept returning to the Gulfstream. So, what exactly do you do now? Mom was pretty vague about it. I run a venture capital firm. We invest in startups. His eyebrows rose. Venture capital? Like millions of dollars kind of investments? Sometimes. Yes. The look on his face changed from surprise to something darker. A mixture of envy and bitterness I recognized all too well. Must be nice, he muttered. Some people just get all the luck. The comment struck me as so profoundly ironic that I almost laughed. Travis, who had been given every advantage, every opportunity, who had received a Porsche while I received discouragement, was accusing me of being lucky. Before I could respond, Travis pulled out his phone. You know what? I need to call Mom. She needs to hear about this. To my astonishment, he dialed right there in front of me, putting the phone on speaker as if wanting me to hear. Mom, he said when she answered. You'll never guess who I just ran into at the airport. Dion. My mother's voice sounded thin and surprised through the speaker. How is he? Oh, he's great. Travis replied, his tone dripping with sarcasm. He flew in on a private jet. A private jet, Mom. How did he get that? The last part came out as an almost childish wail, loud enough that several people in the terminal turned to look at us. There was silence on the other end before my mother's voice returned, quieter now. Travis, are you sure? I'm staring right at it. It's got some company name on the side. What was it again? He looked at me expectantly. Outsider Ventures. I supplied, feeling strangely calm despite the surreal situation. Outsider Ventures. Travis repeated into the phone. Apparently, little brother runs a venture capital firm now, invests millions in companies. Meanwhile, I'm sharing a hotel room with Gary from the Peoria office to save on the conference budget. The bitterness in his voice was so raw, it was almost painful to witness. Travis, please calm down, my mother urged. We can discuss this when you get home. Discuss what? Travis demanded. Discuss how you and Dad always said I was the one with the bright future? How you bought me that car because I deserved it? Well, look at us now. I could hear my mother trying to soothe him, but Travis had worked himself into a state of agitated resentment. After a few more exchanges, he hung up abruptly, turning back to me, eyes red. Must feel good, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Coming back like this, showing everyone how wrong they were about you. Something in his expression, the genuine pain beneath the hostility, made me soften. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong, Travis. It was about proving something to myself. He scoffed, but I could see my words had landed somewhere. Look, I continued. My plane will be ready in about an hour. Why don't you come aboard? We can talk properly. Travis hesitated, pride visibly wrestling with curiosity. Why would you want that? So you can rub your success in my face some more. No, I said sincerely. Because despite everything, you're still my brother. After a moment's consideration, Travis nodded stiffly. Aboard the Gulfstream, seated in the plush leather with drinks in hand, the facade Travis had been maintaining began to crumble. I've made such a mess of my life, he admitted, staring into his whiskey. Nothing ever worked out the way Mom and Dad said it would. The marketing job? I got fired after 2 years for missing deadlines. Then it was one mediocre position after another. I listened as he detailed his professional disappointments, failed relationships, and growing sense of inadequacy. The golden child had discovered that the real world didn't grade on the curve his parents had established. The worst part, he continued, his voice dropping, is that after you left and started doing well, they changed. They started comparing me to you. Why can't you be more focused like your brother? Dion built a whole company, and you can't even keep a job for a year. The irony wasn't lost on me. That must have been difficult, I said, genuinely sympathetic. It was a complete mind FCK, Travis said bluntly. My whole life they told me I was the special one, the one with potential. Then suddenly, you're the standard I can't live up to. As Travis talked, my phone rang. My father. Undoubtedly, Mom had called him. I should take this, I told Travis, who nodded with resignation. Dion. My father's voice was hesitant, lacking the confidence I remembered. Your mother told me you ran into Travis. Yes, we're actually talking right now, I replied. She also mentioned a private jet. That's correct. There was a pause. I think we need to talk, son. Really talk, as a family. Would you be willing to come home for a visit? It was the first time in nearly a decade that my father had directly asked me to return home. The request hung in the air, weighted with unspoken apologies and regrets. I'll think about it, I said finally. But I need to know it would be different this time. It would, he assured me quickly. We've changed, Dion. Seeing how you've succeeded despite how he treated you. We've had to do a lot of soul searching. After ending the call, I turned back to Travis, who was watching me with a complex expression. They want you to come home, don't they? He guessed. I nodded. Are you going to go? It was a question I had been asking myself from the moment I recognized Travis in the terminal. Was I ready to revisit the source of so much pain? Was there any point in reopening those old wounds? Looking at my brother, seeing the genuine vulnerability beneath his resentment, I made my decision. Yes, I said. I think it's time. 1 month after my unexpected reunion with Travis, Sophia and I landed in Boston with our 2-year-old son, Leo. The decision to bring Leo to meet his grandparents for the first time had been difficult. Part of me wanted to shield him from people who had rejected me. But Sophia gently reminded me that healing sometimes requires taking risks. This is as much for you as it is for them, she said as our rental car approached the familiar neighborhood where I'd grown up. Whatever happens today, we'll face it together. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The blue shutters had faded to a pale periwinkle. The front yard, once Dad's pride, showed signs of neglect. Ready? Sophia asked, squeezing my hand as we parked. I nodded, though the knot in my stomach suggested otherwise. Mom opened the door before we could ring the bell. She had aged considerably in the decade since I'd last seen her, her once dark hair now completely gray. deep lines etched around her eyes. She stood frozen for a moment, taking in the sight of us, her eyes filling with tears. "You came," she whispered, as if speaking too loudly might make us disappear. Her gaze moved to Leo, who was half hidden behind Sophia's legs. "And this must be your grandson." "Leo, this is your grandmother," I confirmed. Mom pressed a hand to her mouth, overcome with emotion. Behind her, Dad appeared, looking thinner and frilier than the imposing figure of my childhood. "Dion," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you for coming." The initial moments were awkward, filled with tentative hugs and careful small talk. In the living room, I noticed several of my academic awards from high school, now framed and displayed prominently, something that had never happened when I actually lived there. Travis arrived shortly after, looking more composed than he had been at the airport, greeting Sophia warmly and getting down on one knee to introduce himself to Leo. Over lunch, which Mom had prepared with obvious effort, the conversation remained superficial until Leo needed a nap. Sophia offered to take him upstairs to my old bedroom, which Mom had prepared with a portable crib. Once they were gone, the air in the dining room grew heavy with unspoken words. "I think we need to address the elephant in the room," I finally said. "The last time we were all together in this house, you bought Travis a Porsche and told me I'd never have what he had." Mom flinched as if I'd physically struck her. Dad's gaze dropped to his plate. "We were wrong," Dad said simply, looking up to meet my eyes directly. "So terribly wrong. And not just about that car, about everything. We thought we were doing what was best," Mom added, her voice trembling. "Travis seemed to need more support, more encouragement. You were always so self-sufficient, so capable, so you punished me for it," I stated flatly. "Yes," Dad admitted, surprising me with his directness. "That's exactly what we did, though we didn't see it that way then. We gave Travis everything because we thought he needed it to succeed. We gave you nothing because we thought you'd be fine regardless." Travis shifted uncomfortably. "They set me up to fail, Dion," he said quietly, "by never letting me struggle or solve my own problems, by making me believe I was entitled to success without working for it. It was a level of self-awareness I hadn't expected. After you left," Mom continued, "we were so angry at first. How dare you walk away from the family, we thought. But as years passed, and we saw you building something remarkable on your own, while Travis struggled despite all our help." She trailed off, tears streaming down her face. "We had to face some hard truths about ourselves," Dad finished for her, "about the damage we'd done to both our sons in different ways." For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of decades of dysfunction settled around us. "I didn't come here for apologies," I finally said. "I came because I need to move forward, and that means addressing the past rather than running from it." "What can we do?" Mom asked, wiping her tears. "To make things right." "You can't make it right," I said honestly. "We can't go back and change what happened. But we can decide what kind of relationship we want going forward, with clear boundaries and expectations." Dad nodded slowly. "That's fair. More than fair, considering everything. I want Leo to know his grandparents," I continued. "But I need to know he'll be valued for who he is, not compared to others or measured against some arbitrary standard." "We would never," Mom began, then stopped herself. "We will do better. With both of you, and with Leo." Travis had been quiet for most of the conversation, but now he leaned forward. "There's something I need to say, too." He addressed me directly. "I was jealous when I saw you at the airport with that plane. But I was also proud. Proud that my little brother had accomplished so much, even though everyone, including me, told him he couldn't." His sincerity caught me off guard. The brother who had mocked my ambitions was acknowledging my success without resentment. "I've been thinking a lot since Chicago," Travis continued, "about how I've been blaming everyone else for my failures. Mom and Dad for spoiling me. You for making me look bad by comparison, the economy, bad bosses, whatever. But the truth is, I never really tried. Not the way you did." "It's not too late to start," I told him. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about," Travis said. "I don't want handouts or charity, but I could use some guidance. Some real mentorship about how to build something meaningful." It was the last thing I had expected from this reunion. My brother, asking for my help. "I'd be happy to," I found myself saying, realizing I genuinely meant it. "But I should warn you, I'm a demanding mentor. Just ask any of the founders in our portfolio." For the first time that day, The tension in the room broke as Travis laughed. I would expect nothing less from the overachiever of the family. As the afternoon progressed into evening, we began the delicate process of redefining our family relationships. It wasn't perfect or complete, but it was a beginning. Before we left, Dad took me aside while Mom and Sophia were cooing over Leo. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low and serious. "The day you left, after finding your note, I was furious. I said terrible things about you, convinced myself you were being ungrateful and dramatic." He paused, gathering himself. 3 years later, when news of your first company's success reached us, I realized the magnitude of what we had done. We had a brilliant, determined son, and instead of nurturing that, we crushed it at every opportunity. His eyes, so similar to my own, filled with tears. "I don't expect forgiveness, Dion, but I want you to know that my greatest regret in life is not seeing who you really were when it mattered most." The raw honesty of his confession moved me more than any apology could have. "I did forgive you, Dad," I told him gently. "Years ago, not for your sake, but for mine." Carrying that anger was weighing me down, keeping me tethered to the past. He nodded, understanding. "You're a better man than I ever was." "No," I corrected him gently. "Just a different one." The drive back to our hotel that evening was quiet. Both Sophia and I were lost in our own thoughts. Leo had fallen asleep in his car seat, his peaceful face illuminated occasionally by passing street lights. "What are you thinking?" Sophia finally asked, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "About healing," I replied. "How it's rarely the dramatic, cathartic moment we imagine. It's messy and incomplete and ongoing." She nodded. "Are you glad we came?" "Yes," I said after a moment's reflection. "Not because everything is fixed, but because I'm no longer defined by their rejection. That part of my story is just that, a part, not the whole." In the weeks and months that followed, we established a new, cautious relationship with my parents. They visited us in New York, marveling at our home and the life we had built. I helped Travis develop a business plan for a consulting firm focused on helping small businesses implement effective insurance strategies, combining his industry knowledge with my entrepreneurial experience. The most profound change, however, was within myself. The wounded young man who had left Boston with nothing but determination had finally made peace with his origins. The words, "You'll never have that," no longer echoed in my mind during moments of accomplishment or doubt. I channeled this healing into creating a scholarship program through Outsider Ventures, specifically designed for students who, like me, had the drive and talent but lacked family support or resources. The Outsider Scholarship provided not just financial assistance, but mentoring and internship opportunities. At the inaugural scholarship ceremony, standing before 20 bright-eyed recipients who reminded me so much of myself at that age, I shared my story publicly for the first time. "The most valuable lesson I've learned," I told them, "is that other people's limitations are not your reality. When someone says you can't do something, they're telling you about their boundaries, not yours." As I looked out at those young faces, full of hope and determination despite the obstacles they had already faced, I felt the final piece of my own healing fall into place. The words that had once driven me from my home had ultimately driven me to create something meaningful, not just for myself, but for others who needed to know their worth wasn't determined by those who should have valued them most. Sometimes rejection becomes our greatest redirection. Sometimes the words, "You'll never have that," become the very fuel that propels us to heights even we couldn't imagine. But the true success isn't in proving others wrong. It's in living fully aligned with your own potential and purpose. Have you ever experienced someone underestimating you or telling you that you couldn't achieve something? How did you respond to that challenge? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories of transformation, and share this video with someone who might need a reminder of their own incredible potential. Remember, your worth isn't determined by other people's perceptions, and sometimes the greatest achievements grow from the soil of doubt and dismissal. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And until next time, believe in yourself, even when no one else does.